Welcome to another video for One Loose Sprocket, and what I'm going to do today is I'm going to take this old rusted rear wheel, 26-inch rear wheel, and basically just restore it. I'll take off the freewheel. It's rusted, pretty bad shape because it doesn't even rotate at all, so I'll have to take this apart. Obviously for what it's tight as well here, so it doesn't rotate. The bearings are probably seized up inside somehow. Obviously on the back side, take a look at it. It's been out in the weather for some time. It's caked with stuff, and if you look at the rim there, the rim has junk all through there. The nice thing is that this is apparently, if I'm not mistaken, it looks like it is an alloy rim. So the aluminum will be pretty easy to clean up. There's not too much rust and things like that. The spokes look like the spokes are kind of rusted as well. Their spoke nipples, I should say, are pretty rusted. I don't know if I'm gonna keep those or not. I just may simply decide to let them go, get some new ones. So at this point, that's what I'm seeing. So based on what I discover as I start to take this thing apart and start to investigate the different components and pieces inside here, I'll determine what my next steps will be. But that's the intent, is to obviously restore this so that it functions as a rear wheel with no troubles whatsoever, no problems. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is take off the freewheel, and to do that I'm going to go ahead, I've got my little freewheel remover here, and that should just slip right over here, get on top there, on the axle, and my adjustable wrench here as well. So I'll go ahead and usually these are difficult to do, especially without a wheel on. I'd like for the tire, like in the tire. So what I use, I have my little cheater bar, which is just a piece of PVC pipe, and just take that out. Slip that on here. And these can be really on there. So, okay, and this is always the problem with these freewheels, is because they are almost always very tight on the hub, but they do come off. So looking at this thing just first glance, again, there's a lot of dirt inside here. And again, just just reviewing this, still it's tight. There's definitely going to be some problems in here. We're going to have to take this whole thing apart inside here as well. And let's see what we have here. So plenty of rust all around here, and no doubt there's some problems in here. The pawls are probably all junked up. I'm positive it's not greased in here as well. It's shot. So again, I'll have to take this apart and just review it inside, and I might try to take off each one of the individual cogs here as well to try to clean those individually. Otherwise, I do have a method that I have that's pretty nice, that I can clean these up without taking these all apart individually, and it shouldn't be too bad, so we will see how that turns out. So the first step in taking apart the freewheel is to remove the lock ring that is on the inside of the sprocket. It is a left-handed thread. I of course hit it with some penetrating oil, my solvent of choice, and as I was loosening it up, it actually did start to loosen up, of course, because it had been seized previously. So I'd actually hold the back end with my freewheel removing tool, and then I was able to take off the ring completely.
Now I knew that the bearings inside were very small and are easily lost. So as I took it apart, I tried to keep all the bearings as much as I possibly could, but even then a few escaped me. But it didn't make much difference because the majority, I could see at least half of them were rusted, and there was no reason. I did put it in some solvent just to see what would happen, but I didn't have a whole lot of hope for them. I just figured it'd be easier just to replace the bearings themselves. So I started to investigate the inside bracket and wanted to see what exactly how it looked, and it didn't look too bad. I cleaned up the bearing races and all the surfaces there that had a significant amount of rust. Obviously, the external surfaces were very rusty. The internal surfaces were not too bad. It did take a little bit of work, but it was not that difficult. It was much more of just a matter of making sure that it was clean and was not take off most of the tarnish. And it really was making sure that the threads on the outside were clean and get all the rust off of them. Then I went ahead and took the pawls off with the retaining clip to really allow me to disassemble it completely and go ahead and clean that area. Because of the fact that the pawls were not bad, that was nice to see that there was no rust there, because they're far enough on the inside that they typically do not get damaged or rusted. But at the same time, there's enough external rust that kept it seized up, and so that was what I really had to clean up as I did this whole process of reassembling, or of taking it apart and reassembling it. So now that I'm going to take apart the actual sprocket itself, it does have a thread. I didn't know which way the thread went. I didn't know if it was a left-handed thread or right-handed thread. So I just went ahead and just attacked it with my free hub retaining chains that I used, those tools. Luckily I had two of them, and it's really nice because of course then the chains actually grab it and actually rotate it. So I went right, lefty loosey, righty tighty, and then I went backwards and then just tried to work at it until I could see that there was some progress. I did see a little bit of movement, so I knew I was getting something, but I didn't know if I was tightening it more or if I was actually loosening it. So I went ahead and just worked at it until it finally did come loose, and I was able to take apart all of the sprockets and take out all the individual gears themselves. I even went so far as to use a hammer or mallet to try to loosen it up, and it did, and that was the key. That actually just enough strength to cause it to come loose. And as you can see, I just was able to remove each individual gear, as well as the spacers they had in between them. I did a quick inspection. I could see that the spacers were plastic but rusted. So obviously there's surface rust that had bled off from the actual sprockets themselves, and I went ahead and started cleaning it. I used a wire brush and had marginal success with this. As you can see, after a while my hand did start to get tired of holding this, but I wanted to at least see if I could take off a lot of the rust with this, and I was somewhat successful. Once I had the sprockets off the freewheel itself, then I went ahead and cleaned that as best I could with the wire wheel, and just took off all that surface rust. Again, it's a common theme, obviously, because that's really what I had to do, was just clean it up and get the junk off there. The key is to be able to disassemble the entire freewheel, to be able to get at those pieces and attack them individually, because if you don't have that ability to attack them individually, then you never can get all the way into every crook and cranny. You always miss something, and therefore it's not a thorough job. And that's why I spent the time to break it down completely disassemble the freewheel and attack each individual component of the freewheel itself. So the next stage of my cleaning process was to use a 400 grit sandpaper as an abrasion medium to remove a lot of the surface rust on the different components I was working with. Obviously, the individual sprockets were really the ones that needed the most attention. They were the ones that were most rusted and had, severe amount of rust on them, to the point where I was just cleaning and cleaning and cleaning, and the rust was just coming off and coming off. There was so much that was there. But at the same time, I could see there's progress made, so I said I'll continue to do this. Even though this is not the best method, it is a method, and it was not getting into, because of the fact that the sprocket teeth are actually twisted slightly. It's not going to allow you to get down in there, nor will it allow you to get down into the gaps between the sprockets, the holes in the sprockets that they stamp in there to reduce the weight. I knew I was not going to be able to get in there, so I figured what I do is concentrate strictly on the surface, get that as best I possibly could, and then from there I'll decide what would be the next step in getting the rust off other locations. So my next phase was to continue with the wire brush. I was having a little bit more success, but again, this blended approach I thought was actually quite good. The problem was my hand was getting tired holding the drill, so I decided to zip tie it so it would be constantly on and I wouldn't have to try to hold the trigger, because it didn't have an auto set trigger. So I just had to zip tie the trigger so it was on. And again, it was nice. It got between the teeth. Okay, again, that was what I was looking for, to kind of get in some of the areas. But again, sometimes it would grab the piece and kind of jerk it, and there were times my hand would brush against the wire wheel, and that was not the best. And I was afraid it was going to grab it and fling it out and just rip it out of my hand. So it was a little bit dangerous for me to go ahead and just do it this way. But at the same time, I was able to get some results as I was looking to try to clean up those, like I say, the teeth and the edges and some of the places where the flat surface of the sandpaper was not doing. So I was able to do a little bit better with that. Once I got tired of using that wire brush on my drill, which was okay, but I just was not getting the results I wanted, I thought it would be much better if I brought out the big guns, and I have a 6-inch grinder with a wire wheel on it, and that was much easier. Although, because of the fact that the grinder does rotate at 350 RPMs, I was a little bit more concerned about it grabbing one of those sprockets and throwing it at me like a shuriken or something, and I didn't really want that. I wanted to keep it try to keep it as clean, so I had to be very careful as I was using this, and it was taking off all the rust that I could see. The visible rust was definitely being removed, so I was very happy about the results as I was doing it. And I decided, okay, this is probably the better way to do it, with the danger, of course, of having that thing spinning at such a high speed. So with that said, I said, you know what, maybe I better put some gloves on, a little bit heavier duty gloves than just these very thin nitrile gloves that I'm wearing. So I went ahead and put on some of these, because the wire wheel will actually throw off bits of the wire themselves, little bits of wire and things like that as it's removed from the actual wire wheel itself, and that's dangerous. And there's a couple other things. Of course, I have my plastic shield down to protect myself from most of it, so I wasn't too dangerous. I wasn't too concerned. I was wearing glasses as well, but regardless, I had to be very careful not to let it catch on the inside lip of the sprocket, but at the same time, it was much easier for me doing it this way. So as I started to put this back together again, I cleaned up all the spacers and basically cleaned up all the parts that would be inside the freewheel. cleaned the pawls. Was able to get some more bearings. Confirmed that all the inside sprocket as well as the outer section was all good. Started to clean up all the slip rings as well. And basically just prepared myself for the actual assembly process. I pulled out the bearings, I looked at them in my eyes, and this is when I made the determination I was not going to keep them because I let them sit there and soak for a while. But as you can see, there were several that were tarnished, and I was just like, you know what, it's in the essence of what it's worth, I'm not going to try to save them because I don't want to try to make something work and then later on down the road have them not work because they start to fall apart or they start to grind against each other, and then I'm really putting it back into a situation where it's not good. So the actual assembly itself, I did have a pneumatic greaser that I used that had a needle attachment, and I used that to put, because of the fact that it's such a small area that requires the grease, then I try to be as clean as I possibly could to put the grease only in the place where the bearings would be, because the pawls do not need grease. Actually, they actually would want to have oil, because then it is a closed system for that. At least the gear, I use gear oil, so it was a little bit heavier than the typical oil that we typically would use. And using the grease, it was marginally successful. I was having troubles with it, so I was like, you know what, I'm not gonna bother with it, I'll just do it with my finger like I always do. So that was the way I added it. There was enough. Luckily, when I got the new ball bearings and put those in there, then of course that's really the way I should have done it. So once I had enough grease on the internal race of the Freewheel hub, then I went ahead and started adding I think there's 32 1/8 inch ball bearings that have to go around the inside race, and this is on the outer side of the Freewheel, which would be closest to the spokes. So this is the internal race. And then once you can see that I was able to move them around a little bit with that awl, which has just enough of magnetism that it'll pick up one of the ball bearings, but it also takes a long time, and I was getting bored with that, so I went ahead and just grabbed a whole bunch with my magnetic tipped Phillips head screwdriver, and then I just would have placed them put them in their spot, because the nice thing is the grease actually will grab hold of them, and then I didn't have to worry about them falling off either. So that's kind of the reason why I want to pre-grease those races so that they don't slide around and fall out, because again, you lose those those little tiny ball bearings are a nightmare. Then I went ahead and added my gear oil to the area where the pawls will go, and of course what the pawls will do is they are held in place by a retaining ring, and that retaining ring is what puts a little bit of pressure on them to cause them to swing out. And what they do is then they will, as they rotate, they will rotate in one direction only, making that typical clicking sound that you hear all the time. But then when you try to rotate it the opposite direction, it'll grab the inside ratchet of the outer housing of the hub, and when it does that, then that's what allows you to transfer the power from the chain on the sprocket to the wheel on the inside. So I tried to add some grease using my little aerosol can, which is really nice, but unfortunately it's too touchy for me. So I decided to just go ahead and just put it with my awl and just add it on there. Again, just enough that it'll hold the bearings and not let them slide around or fall off the race. And I went ahead and checked to make sure everything's good on the inside there and I said, well, let me just add a little bit in here. And as you can see, I just kind of made pretty much a mess in there as well. But it wasn't that big of a deal because I knew that I had oiled the pawls, I had grease on the inside for the 2 races. So I'm now adding the ball bearings to the outer assembly, or the outer housing of the Freewheel hub. Same process again, just putting them in there, accommodating them. I think, like say on the inside, I want to say there's a little bit less, but I can't be 100% sure because, like I said, I never counted. I just said, okay, I need a little bit more. There's a gap. I need to put another one in there, and I just went ahead and did that. Once I finally had all the ball bearings in the right location, I think I do what I find to be the most fun of all, and that is to put the free hub back together at the assembly, because it just falls right into place. And once I get that lock ring in place and I can hear the ratcheting sound of that freewheel, it's just a great feeling to know that it's there. It's not moving around. It's not going to cause any problems at that point. And again, it's just compared to what it was at the beginning, where it was so seized up that nothing happened. It's just a great feeling. So I did begin the assembly of the sprockets onto the free hub, the freewheel assembly itself, and of course it was just a matter of lining up the different sizes to fit in the right spot, as well as remember to put your spacers in between, as I just forgot. But once I was able to make sure that I have all the pieces in the right location, again, just screw on the last sprocket to make it fit right. I actually pulled it out just to make sure it was good. I was not doing something wrong here, and went ahead and again just tighten it down with my good old trusty Freewheel retaining chains, and that's what it took. So once that was on there, it spun fantastic. Again, all the rust is off. You can see it actually looks practically brand new. I mean, there's tarnish. I mean, there's no way I'm gonna get all that off. But as far as what you would expect, it looked fantastic. Okay, so now that I've taken apart the Freewheel and reconditioned all the bearings, replaced all the bearings, and cleaned the pawls, and as well as all the internal mechanism of the Freewheel, cleaned each one of the actual sprocket, the gears. They've all been now cleaned up. Somewhat pitted, it's not the best. Obviously this has definitely been outside for quite some time, or it has been exposed to the elements for a number of years. The fact that this is a 6-speed tells me this is definitely from probably early 90s to maybe even the 80s. Not quite sure, but it's definitely seen better days. But now it spins very, very nicely, because with the replacement of those bearings, again, the races were not bad at all. They just simply had to be cleaned up pretty well, but you can see it rotates very nicely now as expected. So this is now done, and now we're ready to move on to the wheel itself. So again, the intent is to, and I'll just remove this spoke protector here so we can get a little better look at it. Okay, so obviously the intent is to I'll take off the spokes, take out these spoke nipples, and I'm starting to look at this, and it does seem to be alloy. It seems to be alloy, although it does appear to be the spoke nipples do appear to be steel, and that is a little bit of a problem because I really don't like working with steel necessarily. However, we'll just take them off and clean them up, and we'll see what they look like. I might just replace those as well. But obviously, I'm looking at the rim. The rim seems to be in pretty good condition, but once we get it off and cleaned up, then we'll take a look at that better. And of course, we still have to work on the hub itself and clean that up as well. So as I started in on the breakdown of the wheel, I cleaned up the rim as much as I could just get the junk off it. Now, you may notice that the wheel is rotating very nicely. Well, it's not really rotating per se. All I have is just have it sit on my truing stand. The hub is still seized. I don't have it clamped down, so it's not really rotating per se. It's all it is just simply rotating in the V notch on the truing stand itself. So I'm going in and of course just starting to loosen up all the spoke nipples and just get them clean, get them off and start to basically just assemble, take out the spokes and get it to the point where I can start to look at the individual components and just determine what my next steps are. That's really what I'm doing right now. So I don't have a huge plan just yet, because obviously it's just a lot of drudgery and a lot of menial work. Of course, I did find out that those spokes were in fact steel, because they stick to my little platter thing that I have there that catches all my spokes. So that's one way I can tell that they were steel. And I start to remove, of course, each one of these spokes, and they start to fall off, and then it just to free up the actual rim itself. So I do have a couple things that I use for removing the spokes. I use there's a spoke wrench as well as a flat-headed screwdriver. Either one would work. It kind of depends on what I'm doing and if I have how good the spoke nipples are themselves. So that's really what I'm looking at. The rim was relatively straightforward in cleaning. I just cleaned the outside with a wire brush, and then just looked at the inside. It looked okay. Like I said, there's no real blemishes. It seemed fine. And then I just took out the spokes from the hub, just kind of get everything separated out.
Okay, so I looked at the rim here just to give a quick analysis of what I've seen here, and the rim looks pretty good. It is alloy, so it's an aluminum alloy, and I looked at the overall rim and it looks good. I mean, I'm not seeing anything really jumping out at me as bad. It seems to be straight for the most part. So when I was looking at it on the tuning stand, I kind of spun it just to see if there's a lot of wobble, and it did not seem to be that bad. So that looks good. Other thing I check the seam. Make sure the seam's not crooked or there's something bent there, no problems there. The braking surface is a little bit chewed up. I might just hit it with a little bit of steel wool just to kind of clean that up a little bit. But it doesn't seem bad. And again, the seam looks good. It's mating pretty well. And the inside looks really nice. Now that I hit it with a little bit of my Dremel tool, just kind of clean up some of the rough spots. But other than that, this seems okay. So that's the good news. Now the bad news is that I looked, as I was taking off these spokes here, I realized that they were not the best. Okay, these spokes are really bad in the sense that the quality is really bad, and they're all crooked because I don't know exactly what happened, but they are all crooked. I don't know if maybe it was twisted somehow. I don't know. The only thing I can say is I'm not liking what I'm seeing here, and although I could, and of course in the essence of what I do, then I could easily clean these up, put some steel wool to them, and they might look pretty good after a while. But it looks like these were galvanized, and galvanized spokes are not the best. The best ones are the ones that are chromed, because those are almost indefinite. It takes a lot to really mess those up. Or even just the straight steel. Those are okay, but that's because they clean up pretty nicely. But these are ones that I'm looking at, I'm just like, why bother? I've got loads of other spokes. I'll pick out another set that is pretty much the same length, and I'll just use those on this build. So I obviously had them separated out. So this was the non-drive side. This was the drive side, and what I did was I could tell, because if I put these side by side, then I could see, and obviously there's a lot of curve there. This one is just slightly longer. This one is longer, so this is the drive side. And anyway, but regardless, I'm just going to go ahead and find some new spokes to use. The next step really is for me to go in and take a look at this hub, take apart the bearings, and just see why it's probably all just jumped up inside. It's all seized from from dirt and whatever. And what I'll do is just repack the bearings. I'm not expecting the bearings to be bad, or maybe the cups or the races. But again, I will have to open this up and look at it from the inside first. But I have loads of extra parts, so I can definitely pick something if I had to, or if I had to just completely abandon this hub and just say, no good. I have plenty of other hubs that are 36 holes, because that's what this is, a 36 hole hub, and I could just go ahead and grab another one and I could just use that. But again, in the essence of what I do in my channel, then of course I want to use what I have available, or what is on the actual wheel itself, to recondition it, to make it available again. And with me just saying that, obviously I'm not going to do that for the spokes, but I will definitely hang on to these spokes, because you never know. Maybe someday down the road I will say, you know what, I'm just going to use them anyway. I'll just clean them up, put them on something. But for the time being, I'll just go ahead and grab, because I have other ones, I'll just use those. So that is an analysis of where this is as far as the breakdown is concerned. And again, definitely moving along, progressing as I would expect, and just hoping to now find out what the issues with the hub is and start to the assembly again.
The next step is to select the spokes, and of course I have a huge tub of them, several hundred spokes I can select from, but there is so much variability between the spokes. It's not just a matter of grabbing a handful of them and start using them, because I have a mixture of lengths in there, and so I had to individually check each one against the original spokes to verify that they were actually the same length, or at least close enough that I could use them. And when I say close enough, I mean within a millimeter or two is the maximum distance that I could actually change, where I could allow my tolerance for these spokes. So I'm going through and I'm finding that several of them were longer and some were shorter, but for the most part these were actually longer spokes. And so I had to get all of my shortest spokes possible pretty much to be able to make this to make this build. Now, what I'm considering when I'm looking at them is the finish. I'm looking at the type of spoke. Of course, most of these were steel spokes, but some could be nickel plated, chrome plated. They could be really rusted, they could be bent, they could have maybe some abrasion on it or something, they could be pitted from something. So I'm trying to be as consistent as I possibly can with selecting my spoke to make sure that they all fit the others. I have to have a group of these guys. And if I were looking at spokes in a broader term, then I would be looking at are they double butted? Are they bladed? Is there maybe just some sort of coating that's going on here, or maybe they're painted? Obviously, if you're doing this as a wheel build, you just simply go out and buy some spokes. They're probably about $1 each, approximately, to maybe $3 a piece, depending on if you're getting some higher end spokes. And then that is going to influence what it is you buy. But again, you're buying it by a set anyway, so there's going to be a lot more consistency. Whereas what I'm doing here, of course, is I'm trying to pull from different wheels that I've taken apart and making sure that they are the same brand or are at least the same color, and making sure that there's some consistency there. The spoke cleaning process actually is pretty simple. I just have an abrasion wheel that I take out the heavy rust deposits, and anything else that's lighter, I just go ahead with some steel wool and just kind of polish them up. The disassembly of the hub was relatively easy. Just remove the lock nut and the co-nut, and I went ahead and looked at the bearings themselves, and yeah, they were definitely dry. So all the grease had dried up. That was obviously what was causing it to seize up. But actually, there were a couple of the bearings that were actually rusted. And I was a little surprised to see that, but hey, I tossed them all in and let them percolate a little bit, as well as all the other parts, and then concentrated more on the hub. And of course, the way I clean that up is to use an awl and a Q-tip, and with some solvent and a little bit of steel wool. And then once I had gotten most of the stuff out of the inside, I then attacked the outside with my Dremel tool and just polished it up. It really polished quickly because, of course, it was steel. And learned, of course, that this was a made in Japan. So that was a bit of a surprise because I did not expect it to be Japanese. But other than that, it was pretty easy to do. And I went ahead, I lost a little bit of my video of the assembly, but this is the end result once you see all of what I did, and a little bit of blur there, obviously. So, but it does spin really, really nicely, as you can see, and I'm happy with the results. We're going to start to assemble the wheel, and I use my truing stand as just a holding mechanism for putting all the spokes on and that good stuff. It just keeps it in line. So once I set all the spokes on the hub itself,
then I start in on the actual lacing of the spokes, and you have to be very careful about how you do it, because there is you have to cross them correctly, you have to make sure they alternate, you have to make sure that there is in the spoke on the correct hole is going to the right location, otherwise you start to have binding, you'll have spokes that are too long or too short. And I'm just sighting through to make sure that I grab the right hole for the right spoke. Once you've done that, then it's all about the art of truing the wheel, and obviously using the spoke nipples that I was able to grease each one, and I have to make sure that the rim is pretty much straight from the beginnings, otherwise then I have problems with warping, or some spokes will have certain amounts of stress that I don't want. Then what I'll do is, once I get it pretty much true, then I take it off, I stress the wheel, let the spokes kind of settle a little bit, and then go back to retruing it. And I do that about 3 times before I feel confident that it's pretty much it's going to maintain the trueness that I would have that I've given it. And so then at that point, then I'm just simply looking at it, checking, fine tuning it and doing as much as I possibly can. And you can see here I have it on the truing stand itself now. I'm down looking at my guides, and it is really close, really close. And I think I just made a few small adjustments. I mean, they're just like a 16th of a turn, it's just very minor. But again, it's just to be able to fine tune it to make it as perfect as I possibly can, and allow that thing to really just spin completely true. Again, the whole intent is to have that wheel spin as if it doesn't look like it's spinning, other than you see the spokes moving around. The rim should be completely static, both laterally and longitudinally.
So in summary, now that we have the wheel restored, trued, hub cleaned up, all the spokes now replaced, and obviously with new spoke nipples, then we have a very nice and clean wheel. Not the best wheel, but again, my channel's not about necessarily getting the best equipment, because otherwise I'd have Park Tools sitting behind me with this fantastic display of clean everything. Hey, I'm a guy in a garage, I do my work as best I possibly can with what I have, and the whole intent is to, again, keep my cost at a bare minimum, and but at the same time not sacrifice quality. That's really what I'm looking to do. And this hub, actually, because it was made in Japan, then even though it's a steel hub and probably is about 30 years old, it still runs great. I had to replace a couple of the bearings because they were bad, and they just simply, I could see that they were either a little rusted, or that they'd been some of the chrome had been rubbed off with just ground off with the abrasion and stuff like that. But replacing those with others that I have, then it now spins very freely. There's no play in it though. A little, actually. I'm hitting my guides here a little bit. So let me open that up a little bit. Yeah, there's no play laterally, and it spins very freely now because I did clean it up really good on the inside. I don't hear. There's not grinding or anything like that. I don't hear anything that would make me think that there's something going on inside, where there's some dirt or something like that. So again, that's the whole point. And you see it spins very well as it continues to spin. And again, the true now, because I lubricated the spoke nipples, then strangely enough, it actually does a better job of maintaining the integrity and the tension on the spokes than I want. And the only thing this would be missing would be to put the Freewheel back on, which I have here. I have the Freewheel, I have the reflector, and I would have to put some rim tape on here to protect the spoke nipples, or the spokes, from poking through the nipples. And because of the fact I did use some spokes that were just slightly longer than the others, like maybe a millimeter, they actually did not poke through at all.
So I'm really happy with that, and therefore I didn't have to take it apart to get some shorter spokes. So this actually did work out quite well. So again, another video, and I hope that you like the description and all that I do to try to show the mechanism of a wheel and how the hub works, the spokes, how they interact, the spoke nipples, the intent of and the purpose of the rim. And this being an alloy rim, I did prefer to replace those steel spoke nipples with the brass ones, because those typically are better because they are not as damaging to the rim, and of course they don't rust as easily. They can corrode, but they don't rust. And I cleaned, I guess, some better spokes as well that were not just galvanized. These actually are either they're just straight. I think they're just straight mild steel. I don't think they're just cold roll steel. I don't think there's anything special about them. And obviously with the steel hub, you know, although could I have replaced the hub with another hub that was maybe CNC manufactured alloy hub? Of course I could have. But again, that defeats my purpose. So I definitely want to keep everything as original as possible within the limits and the confines of what the wheel provides. But at the same time, I definitely want to provide enough upgrades when possible that will allow this thing to be a wheel that could be used for years to come. So thanks a lot, appreciate it, and until the next video, see you then.